Hi, I'm Bob Canote, and on this episode of Cat Chaos Chronicles, we're going to try to get a 1990 Jaguar XJS Convertible V12 running the way it ought to. In fact, it doesn't run at all right now. If you'll excuse me, I got to haul this thing into the shop behind a garden tractor. Dang it. Now, as I said in the last video, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to swap out the plugs on the Jaguar XJS Convertible. Now, what you need to understand here is that this is not like changing out the plugs on your small block Chevrolet in an hour and a half. Resign yourself to the fact that you've got to plug the coffee pot in and just it's going to be an all-day job. Don't get in a hurry, because with so many things like on these cars, if you get impatient, this could turn out to be your worst nightmare. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. Well, we've got an issue right away. As you can see, I've got the engine support brace in the engine compartment here. This is what I use to take a piece of webbing and go underneath the air conditioning compressor and then loosen the 4 bolts and electrical connections to raise it up to the point where I can get at the first 2 spark plugs on both sides. Well, I've done that. That's the good news, and like everything else, there's the bad news. The wells that the spark plugs fit down in, they're so full of congealed dirt and oil that it will not blow out with compressed air. So we're at the point where, you know, all I got to do is take one connector loose and then one bolt in the back that holds the lines onto the back of the compressor, and I can take it out. Now, the danger of doing that, of course, is that once I've got that out, I'm going to see all the crap down in the valley of death, and then I'm going to pull the distributor and the throttle, turntable pedestal, and everything out of the V there and clean it all up. And then you got to look at things like, well, the intake manifolds are a little tatty looking, and then the cam cover gaskets are leaking a bit, so those should probably come out. And so before you know it, I got half the engine apart, and it's going to take 2 weeks to get all this done, and I don't have that kind of time. So I got to do is put my blinders on and go in there and just do what's necessary to get this thing running. The reason that we need this thing running is that if you've noticed over the years, we've got the Gorilla Top on this car, which is so named because it's about 45% Gorilla Tape to keep it from leaking, actually keep it on the car. And what we got to do is we're going to pull that top off and make notes, and in fact make a video of this, as to how this comes off and how it goes back on, because we need to finish up putting the top on the black XJS that we're doing a restoration on here for a company. So what I need to be able to do, being that that's probably going to take a little time, I need to be able to move this car in and out. So I need to get this thing running, get it running on the other 6 cylinders, all 12 in unison. So what I'll probably do this summer is tidy up a set of intake manifolds and replace the injectors and make up a wiring harness and so forth and do it right. But like I said, right now we got to get stuff done. Well, we got the AC compressor out, and we can see that there's our spark plug, and there's a fair amount of debris inside of that well that did not allow the spark plug socket to go down far enough to actually do the job. Now, it's really important at this point that you make sure that all the debris is out of that well. Otherwise, when you pull that plug out, that stuff is all going to fall down in there, either when you pull it out or when you're trying to get that spark plug back in the hole. So take your time. You can see I was pretty correct here in my assessment of all the crap that's underneath the compressor and everything else along the Valley of Death, of course. So I'll take a little time and maybe clean that up a little bit. But again, the point is to get this thing running. That's better. And for some reason, if I turn it too much, I can't get a focus on it, but it's not the worst I've seen, but it's not pretty. Needed to come out. It's an NGK. I know it's not original. I think Champions came in it originally. There we go. So yeah, this needed to come out, absolutely. Now in the trunk of the red coupe, there was a set of lightly used NGK double V spark plugs. And what I did is I took and put these in the ultrasonic cleaner, and they really came up nice. And these are the ones that are going to go back in my 1990 convertible, after regapping, of course. So, I mean, this is a $75, well, between $75 and $100 set of spark plugs. So they deserve to be reused. Now this is a tool that you might want to consider making for your Jaguar V12 spark plug changes. Makes them a lot easier. First of all, you're going to use a regular socket, spark plug socket, to get the spark plugs out, but a lot of times it's really difficult to get the right angle on the spark plug to get it threaded back in. And this is something that a friend of mine who is a longtime Jaguar mechanic suggested, taking an old screwdriver that had a round shank on it. I cut it off, got a piece of what appears to be fuel line, which was the right diameter for the stub on, or the electrode or the terminal on the end of the insulator, and then a piece of clear plastic hose that gets a grip on the porcelain insulator. So what it looks like installed is like this, and this flexible hose enables you to maneuver the plug in such a position as to get it started. Now when you put these plugs in, be sure you use anti-seize on the threads. It's really important. So, and when you get it in, you simply, if I can demonstrate this, it just simply pulls off like that, and then you tighten it up the rest of the way with a spark plug socket. And you need to torque these things in place. I think it's somewhere between 9 and 12 foot-pounds of torque. Now the A-side coil is located way down there at the bottom of the throttle quadrant mount. And during the course of digging that out to test it, look what I discovered. We got one break in the insulation, actually two breaks right there, and at least one more right there, right there. Do I think this could be a source of problem? I think so. A couple of other tools that you will find useful in this endeavor is, first of all, we've got a tool that is used to grip a hold of the boot of the spark plug and pull it out. The issue being that if you just grab a hold of it with your hand, first of all, you're probably not going to get a decent pull on it because it's particularly toward the back of the engine. It's hard to actually get your hand down there. And if you happen to pull on the plug wire, you're going to, in all likelihood, pull it out of the boot, and then you got to repair that, and it's just best avoided. Another thing that is really helpful is this thing. It's a blowgun with a long reach on it that you can use to get down there and blow the debris out of that well. What I did in this case, and I think it works pretty well, is I took this and sprayed it out before I actually put the spark plug socket on it. Then about halfway up, I pulled the socket off and blew it out again because in all likelihood the debris has been loosened up. And then once the plug is out, stick this actually down in the hole and spritz it really well. And there's no place to go for that air but back out through the spark plug hole, so it will hopefully carry debris that's loose in the neighborhood of that well out of the hole. Now, if you look at this carefully here, you can see that things have kind of gotten out of hand here. First of all, these spark plugs, the 4 in the back here, were so tight. In fact, all of these spark plugs, with few exceptions, required at least 100 foot-pounds to get them to break free. I actually had to put a half-inch dry breaker bar on the extension and socket in order to get some of them to pop free. And that required to have a straight pull on them, particularly when you put the plugs back in. You don't want to break the insulators, and so it just made sense to pull the throttle pedestal out and just be able to get a good straight pull on these things. Not a big job, probably takes 10 minutes, probably takes 15, 20 minutes to put it back in, and not a big deal. But one thing that I managed to do, and I probably did it because it was laying on the fuel rail and I put my forearm down on it, I broke this connector for the top coil connection, and it broke off back here, and I super glued it back together, having clamped this in place, and then put some Right Stuff RTV on the top. I'm going to have to see if I can find the actual connectors for these, because both of these could stand to be replaced. Well, I hate to disappoint you folks, but it's running, and it's running better than it ever has. So there's kind of a gap here between when we last looked at this engine, which was running on half of the cylinders on one side, the B-bank, and where we are now. And the truth of the matter is, I just need to get stuff done here. And just to give you a quick rundown on what I did, first of all, we had half the cylinders working, so we knew that the crank sensor and the flywheel sensor were okay, because it wouldn't run otherwise. I took the B-bank amplifier, which is on top of the upper radiator support, swapped that over, A side to the B side, started it up and ran exactly the same, so I knew that the amplifiers were okay. So what it really boiled down to was the coil on the A side, which is the bottom coil. And so I've got a few of those around here, so I took one, installed it, and bang, fired right up. But it ran like crap. And the reason being, or I assumed, was because the wires that had been on those old decrepit spark plugs were just as old and decrepit. And when I pulled them off, I figured that I'd made a lot of breaks in the conductor. So what I did, being that I had a brand new fresh set of spark plug wires in the back of that red coupe, when I hauled it in the driveway, I put those on. And it ran better, but it still missed. And here's the thing about aftermarket spark plug wires. Number one, you know how they've got the numbers of the cylinders on little sleeves around each one of them? You can cut those off and throw them away, because I found that when I was doing the replacement, that some of them are way too long, some are way too short, and so I just basically took them all off and then mixed and matched them so that they worked out. The other thing is that the terminals that go into the distributor cap on these spark plug wires, I don't know who made them, because they just came in a bag without any kind of a label on them. They were too loose in the distributor cap, and they would actually pop out. So I took a pair of pliers, needle nose pliers, spread them a little bit, stuck them on. They've been working perfectly. The engine has been working great, as good as it ever has been. So that's how we got to where we are right now. Well, it's been a couple of months since I got the convertible running again and got it running on all 12. And the fact is that it's running really well. Not only is the ignition working well, and the fuel injection is working well, the mileage is about the same as it's always been, but the idle is smoother, and everything is really running the way that it should right now. So I'm driving this car just about every day. This doesn't mean it doesn't have its problems. As you can see in the video here, the headliner's coming down, and the top, as always, ever since I've had it, needed replacement. And it's got a heater core that's leaking, although the iron tight cooling system sealant seems to have plugged that leaky heater core up again. But despite all of the issues, it's still a very, very pleasant place to be. And every time I drive it, I'm just reminded of how good these cars are, even when they're in less than perfect cosmetic condition. For me, it's all about driving them. The cars like this, they're not about having, they're about doing. So if you like these videos, like, subscribe, and maybe leave some comments down below so that we know what we can do better. And we'll see you the next time on the Camp Chaos Chronicles.